Right, what the regulations and the HSE require on rockfall risks. To quote an eminent geotechnical specialist, Dr. Alan Cobb of GWP, rockfall may be the fall of one or a few rocks up to 1,000 tonnes in weight that may fall as an isolated event or may be the result of the known failure mechanisms, i.e. playing a wedge and toppling, or may be a precursor to a large-scale failure. What I want to do is start by explaining the legislative framework and then move on to the ACOP guidance and how we would see the application in practice. Right, what's required? I think I should hasten to add that we will be requiring somewhat more than a boulder and a can of white spray paint and the ability to spell danger. Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. Way back in the dim mists of time came HSW. In terms of rockfall, we can sensibly apply two general sections. Sections 2 puts the duty on those employing persons to ensure health and safety at work, all those persons in their employ, and Section 3, which I know you're all conversant with, requires the employer to conduct their undertaking so as not to expose those not in their employ to risk to their health and safety. And these two sections is where we see the term "so far as is reasonably practicable" introduced. The onus is on the duty holder to demonstrate they've done everything reasonably practicable to reduce the risks. Later, in 1992, we had the management regulations, and they introduced the concept of risk assessment. This then fed into the Quarries Regulations health and safety document, which was so as not to duplicate requirements. We can have qualitative risk assessment, the who, what, how, where and when of control measures type of assessment, or we can have the quantitative type where we have severity times likelihood gives you a number. Many programs have been developed, computer programs developed in relation to rockfall, use a quantitative approach. There are some difficulties with the programs and their relation to reality, so sense check them if you're using them and be aware of their limits and assumptions. And I think this is a good place to remind everybody about the difference between hazard and risk. The hazard is the rockfall. The risk is when the rockfall impacts on a person or things, roadways, plants, buildings, etc. It's possible to treat a risk and possible to mitigate a hazard. Current thinking is that any face created in a quarry environment which is unreinforced will be a rockfall hazard. The hazard is the loose blocks of rock on the face. The risk is the consequence of the block falling. Right, now on to the parts of the quarries regs which relate to the management of rockfall. Inspection. 12.1, suitable written scheme for the systematic inspection, maintenance and where appropriate testing of all parts of the quarry. The written scheme shall specify that the faces above A, every place of work at the quarry, and B, every road used by persons at work at the quarry for the purpose of their work, be inspected for loose ground or loose rocks before any work at the quarry commences or recommences. Inspection means such visual or more rigorous inspection by a competent person as is appropriate for the purpose. In relation to historic faces or legacy slopes, it may be impossible to obtain access to inspect the faces for rockfall. There are remote devices such as LiDAR, long-range high-definition laser, photogrammetry and radar surveys that can be used to gain high-definition information from the quarry slopes. These may be repeated over time to indicate where there are areas of movement or to ascertain if the control measures in place are adequate or to determine if further protection measures are necessary. In certain specific circumstances, an optocopter may be used to fly over the quarry and take photographs of places that humans and remote land-based devices can't reach. The inspection scheme should also include guidance on what action is to be taken if defects are found, particularly in cases of imminent risk. Be mindful that it's very difficult to visually inspect for rockfall, as even the most eminent geotechnical engineer will be unable to tell you exactly when that loose block is likely to fall. You can tell it's up there, and you can tell by inspection if the cracks have got bigger, and you can also tell if it's fallen. But what you don't know is when it's going to fall. Danger areas. Equipment or barriers designed to prevent entry by any unauthorised person have to be installed at any danger area in the quarry in which, because of the nature of the work being carried out there or for any other reason, there is the risk of a person being struck by a falling object likely to cause personal injury. Note that these are paraphrased to be relevant to Rockfall only. There is other stuff in Reg 22. Also, be aware that there is Quinjack guidance on the application of Reg 22. This should be applied to areas of the quarry where access is foreseeable and the risk is high. There is no benefit, and it says this in the ACOP guidance, in treating the whole quarry as a danger area. One of the areas noted in the ACOP requiring particular consideration are places where people are liable to be struck by falling objects, such as stone falling from the faces. Some quarries wouldn't be able to operate without expensive additional measures. We're still talking about access to authorised persons, so we need to think about what measures are required to still keep them safe. A permit to work document carried over the top of your head is not going to save you. The operator shall ensure, everybody knows Reg 30, don't they? Excavations and tips designed, constructed, operated and maintained so as to ensure that instability or movement likely to give rise to a risk to the health and safety of any person is avoided. This is a very prescriptive requirement. The risk needs to be avoided. It's not to say that instability and movement won't occur, because of course it will, but the risk to persons from that should be avoided. Not quantified, but avoided. I know I keep saying that word, but it's extremely important that people understand that it is a prescriptive piece of legislation. There is no mention of so far as reasonably practicable. If you've not avoided the risk to the health and safety of any person, i.e. it happens, by default, you are in breach of the regulations. You should seek to eliminate, avoid. Seeking to reduce is not enough. Reg 31, suitable and sufficient rules. Again, we know all about the rules. The rules are there to provide straightforward guidance, including what to do if defects are found, the way materials may be removed from an excavation or tip, including the maximum vertical face height created or left at the end of the working period, and maintenance arrangements for faces, for example, mechanical scaling. Geotechnical appraisals. Reg 32, operated to ensure a suitable and sufficient appraisal is undertaken by a competent person. In relation to rockfall, there is perhaps a slightly unhelpful paragraph in the ACOP which states some appraisals will identify only the hazards from isolated minor failures, such as falls of a single rock or a small amount of sand. It is deemed that these can be adequately controlled by routine daily inspection, the use of appropriate equipment and working methods. It has been identified that rockfall on any particular face still has the potential to kill or seriously injure persons and has not been adequately controlled by the aforementioned routes. Then we have a significant hazard, as defined by the quarries regulations. And a geotechnical specialist will need to be involved. In relation to the suggested control measures, we would advise that these can only be adequately applied to post-QR99 quarry faces, which have been designed to reduce the occurrence of rockfall and are worked with machines that the wherewithal to deal with the faces in their entirety. Historic faces or legacy slopes are high or can be high, steep, and in many cases unable to be accessed for inspection, never mind maintained. If persons could be killed or injured by rocks falling from these faces, they are also a significant hazard and will require geotechnical assessment and remedial measures. We can't ignore them just because they're our legacy faces. (33) Conclusion of the said geotechnical specialist as to the safety and stability of the proposed or existing excavation or tip being accessed, including the conclusion by way of the said excavation or tip represents a significant hazard by way of instability or movement. Therefore, measures need to be put in place to, and it's that word again, avoid the risk to persons. There should be recommendations for safe working and remedial measures advised that should be completed in the timescale specified. And that completed in the timescale specified is extremely important. Your geotechnical report should tell you what you need to do and when you need to do it by. And the important thing is it's actually a legal requirement that you do it by when it's specified. We have 6, but if you include the requirement for risk assessment in the document 7, 6 regulations to help us understand and manage the risk, together with assistance from Quinjac in the form of information sheet number 1, guidance on safe management operations in quarries. There is information sheet number 1. It's on safequarry.com under the geotechnics section along with others. And I'll just read out for you, because this has been available now, I think, since 2009, June 2009. Paragraphs 3, 4 and 5, just very briefly. Paragraph 3, it should be presumed that maintenance of rock faces will be necessary in quarries where blasting takes place. 4, failure to manage faces where a risk assessment, being an assessment recorded as part of the health and safety document and required by Reg 7, has identified the need to do so, increases the risks from hazards which include loose materials falling onto people and plant below. It may also result in inability to establish a safe standoff zone at the crest. Where blasting is required, controls must be in place to ensure that a solid, stable face is exposed for the purpose of blast design to prevent associated risks from hazards such as fly rock. I think later presentations might give you a bit more insight into that. Account should also be taken of any changes that could occur in unsupported faces, particularly when revisiting older faces during quarry development. Because don't forget, those legacy faces, some of them we may get planning approval for development to go beyond them. We need to know how we're going to get at them. During face operations, the workforce may be exposed to falling material or to overturning plant if the work is not properly planned and the plant properly positioned and protected. For example, by the use of FOP structures and ROP structures. I want to talk a little bit about those in a minute. Operators should not rely on FOPS cabs when assessing the level of protection necessary, and I'll just expand on that in a minute, to take account of falling rock and should take into account the relevant standards for such protection. So there's a lot of information in here. If you're not conversant with it, I would suggest you need to be. Now this is a subject close to all your hearts. Since October 2012, HSE have been implementing fee for intervention. Where a material breach is found, i.e. the law is being contravened, relevant examples being lack of current geotechnical assessment where there are clearly significant hazards, remedial measures not completed in the timescale specified, remember what I said a few minutes ago, instability and or movement giving rise to a risk to the health and safety of persons that has not been avoided. Plus, if the inspector deems that it's necessary to deal with the breach by the writing of a letter or the issue of a notice, or the investigation will lead to a prosecution, then a fee is chargeable of £124 per hour. This hourly rate also applies to all the works undertaken by HSE to remedy the breach and includes telephone calls, reading documents, check visits and the writing of any letters to you. Now, just to show, it still happens. Right, okie dokes. I think we're all right. Does that look like 10 minutes?
Well, it depends if you spread it out or talk quick.
Right, this photograph was taken at one of the largest quarries belonging to one of the UK's largest quarrying companies. A rock fell, by the way, that guy hasn't actually got a star pinned to his back. I just thought I'd point that out. It'd look a bit silly, wouldn't it? A rock fell from the quarry face onto the dump truck. It may have bounced first, or it may have been launched out from a bench below the fall zone as a launch feature. There was no prior warning, and the rock impacted on the cab side of the 775, damaging the front steps. This is the main haul road to the primary crusher, which can be seen behind the truck. The dumper had just tipped his load. The risk had definitely not been avoided in this case. Let's have a look at it. It's a whopper. That's a close-up, and you can see it's a big rock and it's done a fair bit of damage. Have another look at historic faces or legacy slopes. This is a high face above where the rock landed. So clearly it's come from a legacy face. It's not clear where the rock's come from, and there's been no provision left for standoffs or catch benches. It is the duty of the operator to manage these historic faces too. You can't put your head in the sand and ignore them just because you didn't create them and can't maintain them. They are a hazard and they need addressing. Access is non-existent for inspection. Can you make it a danger area? Not really, because access is required to the primary crusher. A remote monitoring regime has been set up to see where there are even small movements of material occurring, with an overall view to introducing appropriate rockfall prevention measures in the areas above the places where persons are put at risk. So action could have been taken and should have been taken before the event. But the main thing is nobody was hurt and it is being put in place now. Quick talk about FOPs. FOPs is not infallible. The standard has been withdrawn, but it's the best we have with regard to numbers at the present time. And it's Part 6, Safety of Earth, the Earth Moving Machinery, on BS 6912, loads of other letters and things which you won't remember. I can't remember them, so I wouldn't expect anybody else to. It was heavily argued not that many years ago that as long as the machine working under the faces had FOPs, it could be put to work in any circumstances where rock may fall onto it. It's obvious it's not the case, as we can see from this photograph. The glass part of the cab doesn't provide any FOPs protections to the standard, and we can see quoted in the standard itself that crush protection is not guaranteed. In Quinjack Information Sheet 1, it states, you should not rely on FOPs cabs, remember I read that out, when assessing the level of protection necessary to take into account falling rock. How it should be managed. That's one way. Not particularly effective, is it? So we could have a joined up approach. Interrelation between the geotechnical specialist, the quarry operating, the blasting contractor, load and haul operator and key employees being a very important issue to bring up, because again we're talking effective workforce involvement, clear channeling and use of information, awareness of trigger events, use of danger areas or rockfall protection devices where appropriate, and reporting of even minor events, because don't forget we've identified the minor event could be a precursor to a major event. It's the minor events that often go unnoticed, but they're the ones that the shovel driver sees, who sweeps off the road on his way down to work in the morning. In the past, may not have thought anything of it. Effective workforce involvement, he is the person who is on the front line, who's seen it, and it's absolutely crucial that he reports it and understands why it's being reported. If we can capture that information, we'll have a much better idea of how unstable faces actually are. The expectations to avoid. Design and remedial measures coming out of geotechnical assessments, design it out. Post QR99, the ambition is to design rockfall out, or at least the danger from it. On working faces, that you have the wherewithal to maintain those faces and provide working methods such as an excavator sitting on a pad with a rock catch trench coupled with FOPs. As I say, don't rely on FOPs, but it is an important part. I'm not saying get rid of it. What we're saying is don't rely on it. Blast design face orientation adjusted to reduce the occurrence. That blasting orientation and delays play an important part in the condition of faces and pre-splits, and smooth blasting can be used, again where appropriate. Recommendations for the geotechnical specialist on the inspection regime and rules are what to look for. Trained and competent persons carry out the inspections, and that there is a high level of awareness of likely failure mechanisms and triggers amongst key employees. such as excavator drivers, shop firers, foremen, and the guy who drives the loading shovel who clears the road up first thing in the morning. Use of danger areas and the use of standoffs, rockfall bunds, fences, netting, etc. So in summary, it's design it out, keep people away, prevent rocks from falling onto them when they are there, use standoffs, netting and fencing. Avoid, again, that is an extremely important word. Problems. Difficult to ascertain by inspection when a rock is going to fall. We've already said that. We can look at it, we can say it looks like it might fall, it might be loose, we can monitor movement, we can see when material's washed away from around it, but we still have absolutely no idea when it's going to fall. We know when it's up there, we know what's happening to it, and we know when it's on the floor, but we don't know when that's going to happen. The hierarchy of management of rockfall is 1. Design it out, seek to eliminate. 2. Keep people out of the area. 3. When in the area, manage the risk through inspection, which is of limited use, or the creation of danger areas, good and understood excavations and tip rules, appraisals, assessment and remedial measures. The onus is on you to prove that you have, and it's that word again, avoided the risk to persons. Preventative measures. Cheap and cheerful. A standoff or catch bund. It demarcates the area where toppling could occur onto persons and prevents access. It's a shame that this one was only installed after a toppling incident that engulfed a loading shovel in 500 tonnes of limestone. See, that is what a catch bund should look like. Another major quarrying company, another large quarry. The loading shovel driver had got out of his machine to talk to the excavator driver and turn round to see his machine being covered in rocks. Now, how many times have you heard me stand up in front of you and say how blooming lucky this industry has been? That luck is going to run out. It's like the falling rock. I don't know when, but I can look at what's going on, I can look at all the incidents and I can say how on earth we haven't killed or seriously injured somebody in recent years through rockfall is beyond me, but we haven't. We have been extraordinarily lucky. Let's take luck out of the equation and do it properly. Absolutely crucial. You can install rock netting or drapes and provide fences to catch rocks and prevent them falling further. Is rockfall riddle reportable? If the instability has the potential to cause the death of any person or to have affected buildings, adjoining land, transport systems, footpaths, public utilities or services, watercourses, blah, 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 yes. Rockfall from a face contained by a toe bund, neither potential to injure persons or impact on a place, it is not reportable. There is guidance again in Quinjack, safequarry.com, there is Quinjack guidance on this very specific issue under the riddle reportable section. Rockfall, not contained in a bund, or there is no bund and the potential to injure persons and there is an impact on places, that would then be reportable. Rockfall in a worked out part of a quarry where there is no access to persons and there was action taken prior to the failure taking place or evidence that there was potential failure, not reportable. So in essence, if it's within the design, and this is probably the most important thing, if it's within design, the movement is within the design and no potential for persons and things, it is not reportable. If it's outside the design or there is no design and persons or places are at risk, it is reportable. The timing of the failure in relation to the working week is irrelevant because a failure happened on the... the timing is relevant. Just because a failure happened on a Sunday afternoon does not make it not reportable. It's the potential that's there and the hazard was not managed, therefore it's reportable. If you're not sure, give us a ring. Again, if you search for safequarry.com, click on the Quinjack button, you'll find yourself with a list of committees. Down there. You may need to just scroll down the page to find that, because I've noticed on some laptops that section is actually missed off. So you may need to just scroll down, but trust me, it's there. Click on Quinjack, bang, there you go. If you click on the relevant committee, you'll see the work that they've done. In the geotechnics section, there's a safe face management operations in quarries guidance for managing change in excavations and tips, inspections of rock faces in the form of a toolbox talk, guidance on creating excavations tip rules, and talk about the duties of the operator. In the pipeline, there is guidance on quarry design relating to the excavation tips and stockpile operations, guidance on suspended and closed sites, and there are some geotechnical good practice seminars travelling the country which I talked to you about earlier, so look out for those. Ba-bum.